So on today's episode, you are invited in to experience a truly next level conversation. Today's guest, Spencer Teo, has been a really good friend of mine for the past almost 7 years now. You may remember from one of my earlier episodes that I had a friend who asked me when I was actually going to launch the podcast and not just let me get away with saying, oh, I'm going to launch it at some point. Well, that person was actually Spencer, so I'm so grateful for the challenger and constant encouragement he is, and I can't wait for you to see it on full display for yourself today. He's kind of like a big brother in my life and is truly one of the funniest people I know. I always love the banter we have together because we both have the same sense of humor and wit. So I guess it's up to you to decide today if we're actually funny or just out of our minds in today's episode. And let me tell you, Spencer is one of the most talented people I know. Seriously, he is a speaker, a rapper, a photographer, a videographer. He actually produced Ben Roethlisberger's newest docuseries on YouTube. Just literally anything he puts his mind to creatively, I swear it turns to gold. I'm not even kidding. I have so much respect for this guy. And in this episode, we get real deep because the topic is how to transform your life and completely change direction. And so we discuss how Spencer went from being a drug addict in Florida to sharing the gospel all over the United States within a couple years time. But hold on, because regardless of what your religious beliefs are, I truly believe this conversation is for anyone and everyone that wants to be challenged and wants to grow as a person. I hope you guys are buckled up and ready to dive in to this incredible conversation I have with Spencer Teo on how to change direction and transform your life. Today, I have the honor and pleasure of chatting with my friend Spencer Teo. And if the last name sounds familiar, it's because his wife was in the Church Hurt episode. She's trying to wave in the background, but I've cropped her out of the scene, so this is really awkward. So essentially, you can laugh, Kens. It can be a live audience effect.
Live studio audience.
Make us think we're actually funny.
Right. She does that in my normal life.
I know.
I've come to learn that I'm not that funny, but my wife just laughs at everything I say.
No, I only keep her,
I get it.
I keep only people that think I'm funny. That way,
I have a small group of friends.
That's right.
I get it.
It's very tight, and I always feel good about myself.
That's the story of my life.
Done.
Story of my life.
Yes. So Spencer and I we have pretty similar interests. We're both really creative, artistic people. It obviously requires.
That's how I say it too.
Exactly. See,
I'm so creative.
Just like that. But we were on Silver Ring Thing tour together, so that was how we met. And Spencer has, by all means, a pretty crazy story of how his life was literally transformed and how he completely changed directions from where he was headed. So we're going to talk about that today. This is an encouraging conversation to show anyone, wherever they are, that you actually have the ability to not stay where you are, but actually move and pivot to where you hope to go. I'm really excited to dig into it with you, Spence.
Let's do it. Let's do some dig. I did bring shovels.
So glad.
Yes.
Blessed.
I knew you'd want to dig into it.
Thank you so much.
So I'm here.
And we can have the treasure hunt afterwards.
Yes. Nice. I told you
See?
she would want to do the treasure hunt.
Exactly.
Gosh, I'm so good.
His wife already regrets being here.
She's so bummed out.
She's like, I'm so distracted.
I'm missing ice cream for this.
Yes, exactly. So Spence, let's first talk about where you were in life before you decided to come to Jesus and come to faith. Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's probably best to start when I was really young, because I think my parents got divorced when I was around 4 years old, and that was a pretty significant influence, I think, through growing up, as I'm sure it is for anybody who experiences divorce. That being said, I always looked up to my older brother. I have a brother who's 2 years older than I am. I just thought he was the dopest dude in the world.
He is pretty dope.
He is. He's pretty cool. And I just wanted to be him. So anything he did, I wanted to do. And he's got a personality that will just light up any room he's ever been in. You hear him before you see him, that kind of guy. So as we were growing up, he got into a lot of different social circles, a lot of circle of friends, right? Some that was in the party scene, so me being his kid brother just kind of got, grandfathered into that. So at a really young age, he and I just started experimenting with drugs, and the unfortunate thing about doing that is a lot of times, you can get hooked on that stuff. And so that's exactly what happened to us. I mean, I remember being 15, I think was the first time I started experimenting with stuff.
Wow.
We were sneaking out of our parents' house, man, doing all the things that seem harmless when you're in high school, right? You're just doing all these things, but it just continued to spiral out of control. And it got to the point where, like, I was feeling super depressed when I was a teenager, and that led to more partying and whatnot. So it got really bad to the point where I was pretty heavily addicted to Oxycontin and cocaine in high school,
Wow.
and I mean, I felt like I was just talking to my wife about this the other day. It's like, I don't remember aspects of high school. Like, I think I have a handful of high school memories that don't involve some kind of narcotics.
Gotcha.
And it's like a crazy thing. Like, you see, like, I don't know, like Netflix specials or TV shows that, like, oh, the high school, and it's like, oh, going off to college or whatever. Like that, it's such a foreign concept to me, because all of mine was a blur and under the influence, and that carried into obviously my later teens and into my early 20s, and it got so bad that, like, when I was 18 years old, my parents kicked me out. Like, you can either stop doing drugs or you got to get out of our house.
Wow.
Like, we can't have that here. Or my brother, they had the same conversation with my brother like 7 months before this. So they ended up sending my brother out to my biological father's house out in San Francisco. Okay. And they're like, we had, people, warrants out, people wanting to cause us harm. Like, it was just a bad scene. So just to save our lives, that's kind of what my mom was thinking. So he was out there. I was like, you know what? I didn't want to stop doing drugs, so I ended up living out of my car. I was homeless for a while, and then I got into a car accident, and that was pretty much the turning point for me, to where I was like, I had literally nothing. Like, when I was living on my car, at least I had my car, right? At least I could park it in a Walmart parking lot or whatever. And if I had that and had $5 worth of gas in the tank, because that's all I could ever afford, I was fine. And so after I wrecked that, I just called my mom up, and I was like bawling my eyes out, and in an attempt to save my life, she sent me to go live with my dad out in my dad and my brother out in California.
So as you're thick in the drug scene, what were you feeling in those moments, or was it all a blur?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think hindsight obviously is 2020, but I'm pretty confident when I say, like, I was always aware I was doing the wrong thing. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, I was always aware. I think a lot of, like, I probably didn't know this back then, but I think sitting here, looking back, like, I was definitely just searching for some level of significance. I think I think every 15-year-old is. I think every human being is, man. True. But I think, specifically, you're 15, you're looking for something. I did it with music for a while, and that's, obviously a lot more socially accepted when you can make music for people than doing drugs and, numbing it, or, but yeah, you're just kind of trying to find a way to make sense of things. So I think a lot of what was motivating my drug use in the beginning, because at some point in time the chemicals just take over. You know what I mean? Right. And that's the dangerous part, man. Yeah. Is at some point in time, like, the human being underneath all that has lost control. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so, but early on, you're just trying to numb it, make sense of it. You don't know who you are. You don't know, who you're supposed to be. It's being human, man. And so, and if you don't have somebody to kind of help you navigate being human, you just go looking for it in different places, And so I think that's just a normal experience that a human being is. Like, it's in the church. It's the reason for discipleship. It's like, well, let me help navigate, help you learn to navigate this new life that you have. And so, if you don't have that, whether it be the lack of a father, whether it be lack of role models, whether it be lack of community, whatever it was, man, I was just left to my own devices. And so a lot of it was that. I mean, I think I was just feeling lost. I think I was probably, I didn't want to experience pain, you know, so you just tend to numb it.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, like a lot of people, in my case, the chemicals just took over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think there was a point, because everyone's on some sort of pursuit of happiness, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that your hope was drugs? Would at one point be that for you? Or was it just like you got into it and you're like, I don't know?
Yeah, no, there's definitely a turning point. Man, I remember pretty clearly like the day that I was like I came to terms that I was addicted to drugs,
Okay.
which is a really weird experience in life because there's a connotation with drug addiction, right? If you've not personally experienced it, you might have heard of it, you know a loved one, like you've had some level of experience around that phrase that gives you a preconceived notion. And I had that as well. Even though I was doing drugs, I'm like, nah, I'm not addicted to this stuff, man. We're just partying. We're just having a good time. Whatever, just chilling, whatever. I was at my friend's house, and his parents were out of town, and we had just picked up some pills, and we were in the bathroom. We had just had this conversation, and we're doing the drugs, and I was like, nah, man, I'm good. I'm fine. Like, we just enjoy doing it. I could stop whenever I wanted. Mm-hmm. And then I remember he went upstairs, and I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I was like, oh, I can't stop this. And there was this a real moment of like, everything I just said to him about like, oh, we're good was a complete lie. Wow. I knew it. It knew it. Like it was a very weird moment. You don't think you're ever going to have that moment, right? As a human. So yeah.
Well, there comes this point when you're like, okay, I don't want this to be my life anymore. And you said a couple minutes ago that you knew it was wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an interesting perspective because people could be like, it was wrong because you shouldn't do it. Or it was like, what was wrong about it in your mind? And did it scare you? Mm-hmm. Like, how did you go through that?
First of all, that whole life is terrifying. Like that whole like I remember I had more weapons pulled on me before I was 18, living on like streets, don't know, like you're showing up to random houses with people, like they don't care about your life, man. They care about making money. Mm-hmm. Like that's what that is. And so, and you're just showing up there because you have this addiction to get something and you risk dumb stuff. Like you will risk your life to go acquire this and not think twice about it. And so, so it's definitely it's all terrifying. Mm-hmm. But what was the first part of your question?
Yeah, did you feel shame in that moment? Like, what made you decide this is wrong?
Oh yeah. So I think a couple levels to that. One, it's wrong because it's illegal, right? The majority of your life is trying not to get caught by the cops, and so you're finagling that. And it's always on your mind. You're an outcast of society. I look like a zombie, you know what I mean? And so everyone's kind of always aware. You don't trust anybody. And so, but not only that, but like your friends around you are dying. And so it's wrong because at any point in time, it could be you.
Wow.
You know what I mean? I unfortunately had to bury like 4 of my closest friends my senior year in high school. Jeez. And it was just one of those things like, again, it's terrifying. It's just one of those things where it's like, oh man, yeah, it was so-and-so this week. You know what I mean? I remember going to one of my friend's funeral and like, it was just like, you got the news and it was like devastating, but you're like, and none of us stopped.
Wow.
It was like, I was with him like 2 nights before and like none of us stopped. We're just, okay, all right, well, we'll mourn. But then right after you leave the funeral, what do you think you're going to go do, man? You got to numb. Right? Because we've been running from this pain the entire time, man. Wow. And we just experienced some more at the hands of this thing, and now we're using it. And so it's this weird cycle. So it's wrong for a lot of reasons, but obviously there's external, but there's also internal, man. Like I'm a firm believer that like, especially as a Christian, I've come to understand it. But even before I pursued my faith seriously, like you have an internal morality. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And like you don't need to watch someone get murdered for you to know and feel whatever that feels for you to know that's wrong. Like it's just there's something like I don't need to tell you that murder is illegal for you to know that it's wrong. Like there's something in you that happens. And so so I think there's multiple layers to knowing, it being wrong, but you just don't, man, you just don't care. Yeah. That's the dangerous thing. You stop caring. I stopped caring that it's wrong. I stopped caring that I could get arrested. I stopped caring I could die. I could stop caring if I'm going to hurt you, if I'm selling it to you. Mm-hmm. And then sooner or later, you're out.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. So obviously hearing all this begs the question, then how did you stop? How did you get out of it?
Honestly, man, this is going to sound like a super cheesy answer, so buckle up. By the grace of God. Like 100%. And I'll walk you through it, and hopefully you can see God's hand through that. So I wrecked my car, right? And my mom and my stepdad sent me out to go live with my biological father. And I'm there, and I'm living in the hood of San Francisco. We're in project housing. Me and my brother, it's the first time I've seen my brother in 7 months, and he's still doing his thing. And I get there, and the first thing is like, yo, San Francisco, man, we gotta find our drugs, right? So can't be that hard, right? We're sitting. Honestly, it took us months because we didn't really know anybody out there, and I ended up like it was probably 3 weeks before we found anything that we were addicted to. You know, you can find like shrooms and all that, but I never did any of that stuff. Like it was, pills and coke was really what I had a problem with, and so I was never really interested in doing that kind of, shroom, smoking weed. Weed didn't really do it for me. But then that was everywhere where we live. But we didn't know anybody that had what we were addicted to. So I spent 3 weeks just kind of like I don't know that I left the house outside of going to the corner store to get a pack of cigarettes or something. And I was just like, I remember like cold sweating, just withdrawing.
Wow. Cold
turkey, just didn't I went 3 weeks of just like smoking cigarettes. I was eating like Snickers. I don't know why. Maybe it's like a chemical dopamine thing, but like I ate a lot of Snickers. I smoked a lot of cigarettes. I drank a lot of coffee, and I just kind of like cold sweated, shook it out, cold turkeyed it out. By the end of that time, like my brother had found somebody there that got us Percocet.
Okay.
And so different painkiller, but I remember getting that, and I remember taking it, and I remember after I took it, I felt like, dude, you were almost out. Like, you were almost out of here. You were 3 weeks without it, man. You were almost out of this thing. Yeah. And you just, out of habit and opportunity, messed it up. You just reset the clock.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And so then there was a period of time when you stop caring. You're like, and you start running. But in the back of my mind, man, I was like, man, it could have been it, man. Like, that could have been it, yo. Yeah. And so we fell into it heavy out there. And then I remember I had a job at a deli in San Francisco. I was like making sandwiches, and this old lady came in and invited me to church. Like, she's just old, like just, and we
like a random customer.
Random, okay. Like just one of those old ladies that is just like way too on fire for the Lord. That like will make it awkward in public places. Got that
Bible in the pocket,
right? And again, I'm in San Francisco, like circa 2009, right? So it's not the most Jesus friendly place in the world, right? So she just found out, like, I guess she would frequent that deli and knew that I was new there, and just invited me to church. And granted, like, I grew up in the church casually. I probably would label myself like a casual Christian. Okay. And that might have been where some of my like morality, came from early on. Like, I always knew I always believed that there was a God. I was just hoping he wouldn't pay attention to me. I was like, yo, we good. He's got his hands full. Like, gotcha. It is what it is, So, and I was just like, yeah, okay. She handed me a business card. I was like, okay, lady, whatever. Like, this is super weird. Like, at this point in time in my life, I'm like, I'm good on all that. Like, I'm just trying to, I got so much on my life. I'm not worried about this Jesus thing, man. And so, for some reason though, I just I remember taking that card home, talking to my brother. We ended up going to that church. Like me and my boy E-Man, it was like, hey dude, we're going to go check out this church in San Bruno, bro. Do you want to come through? And like, I can't tell you why we decided to do it, how we got there. I'm sure we took the BART. Like, all of that is erased from my memory. I do not know why or how we got to that church. We go there. There's like 11 people there. It's a small house. Like, this room might be bigger than the church. Like, it's a small house, and there's like 11 people, including the pastor and his wife, who are in the worship team. And I remember I saw the lady that invited me in the front row, and then afterwards, the pastor was like 26 years old at the time. I think I was like 19, and so I was like talking to him, and he's like, "Hey man, we're looking for musicians if you know any." I'd been playing guitar since I was like 11, right? So music was my thing, and so I was like, "Yeah, I can do that, man. Whatever." He invited me to play in the band, and again, I have no idea why. I was like, "Sure, man." He said, "We practice on Wednesdays." I was like, "Yeah, whatever, bro." And I was out there, and I was like smoking a cigarette right outside of the church, and I was like, "Okay, man, yeah, we'll see, whatever." He gave me his number. I was like, "All right, I'll hit you up." And I went back, and I can't tell you why. Wow. I didn't know the first thing of Christian music outside of hymns. Like I thought it was all whack. I still think a lot of it's whack to this day.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like I just thought it was super whack. And he showed me one song from like Hillsong, and I'd never heard of them before, and it was.
You're like, why is song in their name?
Yeah, no, I thought.
Why are they on a hill?
Legitimately, that thought, like, why is song in the name of a band? Like, that's so cheesy, bro. Like, I'm like, these people are never gonna make it. Like,
Yes.
it's so cheesy. Like, these are so whack. But I remember, like, it was the Our God is an Awesome God. It was that verse with the drums, and I was like, that's kind of dope. All right, I was like, that's kind of dope.
It was the drums that got you the song.
It was the drums with the vocals over the drum. Anytime you put like a very like anthemic chorus.
That was a good word.
Thank you. You know, I'm just studying them word of the day calendars.
Dictionary.
Yeah, the dictionary. I got thesauruses.
Come on now.
So anytime you put like one of those big like arena feeling choruses over just drums,
you're into it.
I'm into it. I'm about that.
I'm that same way with gospel music.
Right.
Like if there's an angelic choir, sign me up.
So Hercules.
Hello.
That's
with,
your jam.
With the music.
Yes.
That's why it's my favorite movie.
Is it really?
Literally.
That's so funny.
For
man.
that reason.
That's like your favorite movie. Yeah.
I wore the Hercules jacket in my Convo with
That's
her.
amazing. I didn't know that. But you know what's funny? If you would have had, this is totally off topic, but it's fine. If you would have been like, yo, Zoe, like what's Zoe's favorite Disney movie? I think I might have guessed that.
I think so too.
But because of the gospel music.
Correct.
I'm like, yo, she got a lot of soul.
Yes. That's where I got my roots from.
From Hercules.
I just studied it.
From Mount Olympus. I get it.
That's right.
I get it, man. Yeah.
I went the distance. Come on now.
Yeah, hey, girl. We all out here.
That's
right.
right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's right. Anyways, back to you.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's actually a fun fact. Now you guys know that.
Yes.
So I just kept going back to this church, and I don't know why. I thought the guy was cool. I thought his wife was cool. She played piano and sang, and she had a phenomenal voice. I loved music. I had an opportunity to play it. He was kind of like this. I remember one of my very first memories with him is we broke into the mall to go skating. Like we were skateboarding, and the cops came. And
with the pastor?
With the pastor.
I'm dead.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So
love it.
That's what I'm saying. And so he went, and the cops came, and my criminal instinct was like, oh, we gotta go, we gotta run. I had nothing on me. Like I don't think I had anything on me. And I was like, oh no, I have to run here. Yeah. This is where I run. And he's like, yo, it's fine. I got this. And he walked up to the cop, and I heard him say, oh, I'm the pastor of that church right down there. And I just thought that was the dopest thing ever, that he had to tell the cop that he was a pastor of a church. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, man. I'm the pastor of this church. And the cop let us go. He's like, man, you know you can't be skateboarding here. I was like,
you're like, I am taking notes.
I was like, yo, that's I was like, so that's how you get out of this. Huh? That's pretty cool. All right. It was just super dope. I just thought that was really... I just thought all Christians were super lame.
Yes.
Yeah, it was my life experience up until that point. And so the fact that he wasn't got me, man.
But it's interesting because there was no overt pull towards that, it sounds like. Like different than the pull that was towards drugs, right?
Yeah.
Do you think you were bored? Do you think you were just wanted a change of pace? Like
no, man, I think and this is I think evident in a lot of people who struggle with addiction. Is like I think I don't think you're unaware of what's happening in your life. Yeah. I don't think you're happy with I wasn't. You know what I mean? I think you do drugs because you're not. And at some point in time, man, if you live long enough to get tired, you get tired. And you've only really ever seen a couple ways out of this. Right, and so you see people who get clean, get sober, get on with their lives, and are able to contribute to building up community, society, or whatever. Man, contribute to your family. And then you see people who get locked up, and you see people who get buried. And so at some point in time, man, I was like, these are my options here. I was like, I got out of, so I was living in the Tampa Bay area in Florida. I got shipped out to San Francisco, California. I'm like, I don't know nobody out here. I can't, and that was tough. You know, I was dating a girl who I was ruining my life with back there, and then that had to break off. Like that had a lot probably into influence my drug use, and this was my only shot. Like if I was gonna do it, if I was gonna stop what I was doing and redefine who I am and the legacy of my life, it's going to happen right here. And for some reason, I knew that. I didn't know the scope of what it meant. Like, I was 19, I think, when I got sober. Yeah, might have been turning 20. So I didn't know the scope of legacy or what it meant for man being a man and the role of man. I didn't know any of that stuff, but I had this internal, like, I was aware, man. Like, I think people who struggle with addiction, like,
yeah,
it's not like they don't know. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like we know what we just can't stop, whether it be environment, whether it be whatever it is. But I think honestly, and I've had this conversation a handful of times, and like. If I've spoken at like NA meetings or stuff, is for me the one contributing factor, like the tangible contributing factor, because I think the number one was just the Holy Spirit like sparing me. But I think how he decided to do that was changing my environment. There was no way I was going to get off of drugs in Florida.
Right.
It just wasn't going to happen.
Right.
I was too connected.
Yeah, and it sounds like people that knew you at the time would say you were the least likely person to.
One of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us, but
Yeah.
one of them, yeah, for sure.
And so just before we continue on the story, just to clarify, do you think the accidental withdrawal you had made you have a different sense of reality? Like where it enabled you to confront things differently?
Yeah, because it was, and we were kind of just talking about this, but yeah, it was, I never had a rep. I never had an opportunity to experience not having the drug and having to face what I used the drug to run from.
Got it.
I didn't have one of those because every time I felt that thing, I just went and got high. And so because I couldn't get high, I was then forced to face that thing I always run from, whatever that is, whether it be like insecurity, whether it be, obviously the physical and mental trauma of withdrawals. Like that's a whole different podcast, man.
Yeah.
Like that experience. And so like, I mean, because taking your life seems like a plausible option. You're like, I can just stop this. And that's a dangerous thing that a lot of people get to, man. And that a lot of people might not understand the severity of people who are trying to get off of drugs or recovering. Like it's a difficult thing, man. And so like your body chemicals is changing. You know what I'm saying? You've been so dependent on something. So
Yeah.
So, as that's happening, like it's a very, very difficult process. And so when I had the opportunity to actually face it, and then you get through the storm, you realize, oh, I did it.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, so I didn't like the way it felt, but it didn't ruin me. It didn't kill me. It wasn't the end of the world. Interesting. And then in my scenario, by the time I realized that, I had an opportunity to do drugs and out of reflex and went back. But I had that experience. I had that experience of like, so there is something over there.
Yeah.
Through there. There is something on the other side.
Yeah.
And it kind of felt good. You know what I mean? I wasn't like afraid. Like it was, yeah. And so I think so. I think for sure. I think God was getting me off of drugs, man, the same time he was introducing. But I would say too, man, like even going back and thinking about it, like that's a very important aspect is you cannot remove without replacing, right? So if you take something that you were dependent on out,
Yep.
you need to replace it with something healthy to depend on because your legs are just too, you need something to lean on.
Yes.
Right. And so in my experience, I had my community ripped. I had the girl I was dating, that relationship ripped. I had my brother he was going through his own thing, man. And so I kind of felt like a lone wolf in some regard. But then this dude who was pastoring and his wife literally moved me into their parsonage.
Wow.
Like I was living with them and we were remodeling. They moved from Alabama to San Francisco to plant a church. And so we're remodeling all this.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was crazy. So I'm out there doing all this stuff, and I'm just hanging out with them, and just because like there was something about them, just like they didn't judge me. Like they would let me like I played in the worship band. I lived their house. They would always buy me burritos. I probably owed them so much money, like for real, like so much money, because I wasn't even considerate about it. I was just like, oh, I know you guys are struggling, pastor. I was just like, yeah, I'll eat that. Like it was like it was so yeah.
I received the blessing.
I should Parker out. I'm gonna write you a check, man. So. Yeah, and they would let me just like after dinner, I'd just go smoke a cigarette on their porch, and they would just let me just be.
Yeah.
They were things obviously. Hey man, here's what you're not gonna bring in my house. But as you're figuring out how to not do that, I'm gonna let you figure it out. And so it was. Yeah, man, it was a beautiful example of how to love Jesus and be in the mess. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
and it did wonders for me, man.
Yeah. So that's what really set the stage
Yeah.
for this transformation for you.
Example.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because again, so if you follow it, right? I have this experience where I get a glimpse of life without drugs, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's interesting. Like, there's something in me that starts to desire that, because I'm just tired at this point. I don't want to die. You know, as far as I can remember, like, I've been afraid of death, right? And so, but I watched it so much when I was throughout high school. I didn't want that to happen, but I couldn't stop this. I'm trying to stop this, but I don't know how to do that thing that I experienced, right? And then I got an example. And I got a dude who looked like me, talked like me, like, was into the same kind of stuff, like, was into, like, hardcore music and, like, skateboarding, and was into, like, the same kind of stuff as me, but didn't have the same problems I had, but came from it. Yeah. And it's like, yo, man, you can, there's a way out. Yeah. And and I had an example to turn to. And so a lot of my faith, but a lot of my what it meant to be a man and establish my life, I just stole from him. You know what I mean? And so as I'm removing this one thing, I'm replacing it with whatever he's willing to give me. You know, and so I think that's extremely important to realize as you're navigating your life, because I think it's so often we focus, and you should focus on what we need to cut out. Very important. But if you're not also replenishing that with something that's healthy and can sustain, it's called congratulations, man. You played yourself.
So good. You see this example, and you said up to this point you were just hoping God was not paying attention to you. Go back to that moment for me where you actually decide, okay, I think I kind of want faith. Like, how did you get there?
Yeah, it was a long process. Like, so anytime I've previously shared my testimony, I always feel a little bit bad because I'd never have enough time to like tell people how things happen in real life. Yeah. And so it turns out like, oh, I was a friggin' idiot and I did all these stupid things, and then Jesus, and we're all good. And I think anybody who's lived, now that happens. I've definitely seen that happen, and it's like, it blows my mind. Like I think God gets so much glory from that. But I mean, not that he doesn't get it from here, but for me, it was just, I kind of like fumbled through it. It was a progression over time. It was that weird dance of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, fall down a flight of stairs, and then get back up. And it was this weird kind of like, you know, I would just perpetually botch things in that, you know, I would just do things that were completely unacceptable in the faith community, but I didn't know because it wasn't my community. I was just there. And so I'd be hearing the gospel on repeat, and then I'd be seeing it lived out. I'd be seeing the implications of the gospel of Jesus Christ on a daily basis. I would see these two, I think Parker was 26 at the time, his wife was 25 at the time, 2 young Christians with no money. They were dirt poor, planning a church, giving above and beyond. They would open their house and feed the community. Yeah. And then I remember going door to door to like my Hindu neighbors, inviting them to church, like. And for me, I was like, whatever, dude. I don't know. I didn't know the implications of that. I was just like, yeah, I'm not afraid of this neighborhood. Like, we'll go into it, whatever. Yeah. And so I didn't realize all that. And so the more time I spent around Parker, and his wife's name is Starla, Parker and Starla, and I watched the driving force of their life. I had to like analyze what was the driving force of mine. And so for so long, it's like you're just selfish. Like when you're a kid, you're selfish, and as you get older, hopefully you get less selfish. Unfortunately, a lot of times we just learn how to mask it well. Yeah. And so we stay selfish, but we portray ourselves selfless. You know, that's a broad brush, but you know what I mean. And so I got to watch how like this Jesus thing wasn't a joke to this dude. Yeah, like he was like dead serious about it.
And it seems like you had this like almost like a fact-checking mentality. Like you were compelled because everything he was saying was actually aligned with his actions.
Yeah. And it wasn't perfect. Yeah. Like he dropped the ball a lot of times in front of me. But like it never ruined him. It never, like it was crazy. I mean, even to this day, man, like I have my own experiences, you know, being saved for over 10 years now, but like it still blows my mind to think about those examples. Like I watched him and her navigate it so well, man. And so but yeah, there was just this I'm very like problem solving, like I'm very logical. Okay, so if that's the issue, why does that do? So I'm just kind of like from a distance analyzing these two, like, okay, so you say that, but then you do that. I'm like, okay, so what? I'm just trying to rack my brain around it. I'm
Yeah.
like, you guys seem to enjoy, like, you're not in a great spot in your life, but you seem to have this, like, it's just unshakable, man. And just time after time, there was never like, I never felt like a project to them. You know, I didn't feel like they brought me in to like, oh, maybe we can get him saved and send him on his way. They're like, nah, man, this kid needs help. And they just wanted to help.
So right now, because we're on that subject, if there is somebody who's listening to this and is like, no, I literally have a Spencer in my life who I'm just like, I don't know what to do with them, what would you say?
I'm gonna cry. Hold on. Dude, don't give up. Please. Because I did some terrible things to their family, and they never gave up, man.
And it's like also that's the picture of God. Like he is literally never giving up on us.
Yeah.
So how dare we?
Yeah, and it's not easy. Like what Zoe just said is 100% true. Like, I mean, thank God that his love is relentless, but dude, when it's feeling terrible, that thought of like, oh, God never gives up, like that's not going to comfort you.
Right.
It's just going to feel terrible.
Yep.
And you're just going to be pissed, and it's just going to hurt, and it's just going to be messy. And just please, for the sake of whoever that person's soul is, don't give up, because if they would have gave up on me, man, it'd have been an easy out for me to go back.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't mean, but at the same time, man, like, doesn't mean you don't confront some stuff. Like Parker laid into me a handful of times. I think love is, like, loving somebody well is, it's freaking hard, man. It's a tough thing to do, and because you don't always know what that means.
Right.
Right. And so I think you have to make sure your intention is pure. You have to make sure like your intention is at the end of this, I hope that they're better for it, regardless of what action is being taken. You know what I mean?
And I think that's the biggest problem with it, because when you are not in it, you think you have the answer. So you're like, I can control this. And you're like, any effort you make to control will literally ruin everything.
Yes. 100%.
So it's so cool that the example was just like, they still let you do you, but showed you that they were going to do them too.
Yeah, it was the epitome, and I'm sure, like, if you've been in a church any amount of time, man, you've heard this phrase, is it's okay to not be okay, it's just not okay to build a house there, right? And so it was the epitome of that. It was like, yo, it's like, you're clearly a friggin' train wreck, bro. Like, but I don't want to leave you like that. You know what I mean? And so I left San Francisco, I don't even know how long I was there, maybe 2 years. But they left like a week after me. And so it was a crazy thing. Wow. Like, it was like they had just moved there maybe a month before I did. And then they left a week after me. And so, like, it wasn't until I got on tour with Silver Ring thing that I was doing like a Bible study and whatnot. And they were like, oh, yeah, think about influential people in your life. I thought about Parker and Starlo. And I was like, yo, God sent them straight to San Francisco to save me.
Yep.
Like, God uprooted a family from Alabama, sent them to San Francisco to go save a kid from Florida. Wow. Just because I was being an idiot.
Wow. You
know what I mean? And, like, It's a crazy, like, God's doing things bigger than you think. He just is.
Yeah.
And so whatever it is we're in the middle of, like, it's just, you just said, we're just in the middle, man. Yeah. Like, what God is doing is so much, it just is, man. Like, they didn't think, I don't know what they thought, honestly, about me, but I've thus gone on to be able to preach the gospel to hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
Because of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Because they just stuck it out with you.
Because they didn't give up, man.
Yeah.
You know? And I made it real hard.
Yeah.
Real hard. Like, I would have gave up on me. Probably.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, I think that's such self-awareness, but I think if most of us confront that, it's like,
Yeah. But
the amount of grace that comes along with those things is sometimes we can't even believe it for ourselves.
No.
And then the amount that we can have for other people after we've been through it, because they feel the same way, you know? From that, you start to have the shift where you're like, I actually want faith. You're pursuing it.
Yep.
And so how are you navigating this? Because you're still having these desires. They don't go away just because you made a decision.
Yeah.
I'm going to change direction. How are you navigating this tension of temptation and trying to forge ahead?
Yeah, I think it's you. So I think things are built the same way. So as I was building this dependency on substances, I was building this dependency on or building these deeper desires for an unhealthy lifestyle. Healthy desires and healthy lifestyle choices or healthy dependencies, if you will, are built the same way, right? And so I actively did that. I actively pursued drugs. I actively pursued unhealthy relationships. I actively did those things, right? So you have to. There are disciplines involved. Like you have to know what you stand for, right? And so I think that's going to be your core foundation. So as a believer, after I gave my life to Christ, you have to learn what that means, right? It doesn't mean everything's all right. It doesn't mean like, okay, like now I'm happy and I don't have to suffer depression. That's just wrong. Like there are depressed Christians. This is what it is, right? And so how you navigate those is there are disciplines. You have to understand like, okay, so what do I stand for now? What am I now called to because of my faith? Yeah. And now how do what can I control to make sure the ship goes that direction? And so that's disciplines of prayer, that's disciplines of worship, that's disciplines of looking for a healthy community. Honestly, man, I think that's why your podcast is so dope, because I don't know how many people fall into conversations like this, right? But this is a conversation you and I have had, this is just a Zoe conversation for me. You know what I mean? The fact that we filmed this time is probably wise. You know what I'm saying? But like, this is just a normal conversation for you. People might not know that if they listen to your podcast, but like, this is just what you do. But there's so much value and growth that comes from that. Like God might use something I said for you. God might use something you said for me. You know what I mean? And so like, but you have to be disciplined in doing that. You have to be disciplined and say, well, let me ask a question to learn from somebody. Yeah. You know, and so I think setting up those disciplines and then getting people around you who want to see you win and people who know what that means. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see you win. Yeah. Awesome. Well, what does that mean? Yeah. Like, what does it actually mean? You know? And so defining that and then getting people around you to do that. And then, because I think a lot of times we call it, and especially with Christians, we call that accountability. But I think we only look at accountability as like people who will call you out and don't nobody want that, right? And so although that's a very real part of accountability, encouragement's accountability. It's like, girl, you're crushing it. And I want you to know, like, you got this. I'm going to hold you accountable to your goal, whether you need rebuke or encouragement. I'm still holding you accountable. Like, we still going to get this, you know what I'm saying?
Such a good
But
word.
what do you need, right? And so I think that's extremely important. And so I think it's, those disciplines, man. But I think one of probably the biggest outside of prayer, reading scripture, is community, man. Yes. Healthy people. And you need prayer in scripture to determine what is healthy, right? Because that will give you the litmus test to gauge your community, right? And so if you're building community without the other two, you might play yourself later on down the road.
Right. And you had to actively seek out community from that point forward. Yeah. And I think it's so cool because that's the thing. Is like, you may have actively been seeking drugs for so long, and like, those are skills God used in your life.
No, 100%.
Yeah, and it's so cool. And like, maybe the narrative was you fell into it. You don't even know how you got there, but you know how you stayed where you did on both ends of the spectrum. And I think that's what's so amazing about you, is because how many years are you clean now?
I think over 10 as well. Yeah. 10 years.
Like, that's
amazing. I'm in middle school.
Let's go.
I'm in sobriety middle school. I think that's middle school. I don't know. Yeah. So, it's crazy, man. Yeah, it's nothing's neutral. If you're choosing not to do something, you're choosing to do something else. Ooh. You know what I mean? That's just what it is. And so if you're sitting there and you're like, oh, if you don't work out, you didn't choose not to work out. Or you didn't just not work out. You chose not to work. You chose to sit on the couch.
Okay, come for me.
You know what I mean? So, but it's what it is. And if we're not intentional with our movements like that, you'll wake up in 10 years and wonder why you're still in the same spot. And you'll probably blame something else.
So good. So
that's
good.
What it is, man.
Yes. In the middle of this conversation, you said when you started pursuing your faith seriously. Yeah. Explain the difference. What does pursuing your faith seriously look like as opposed to something else?
Yeah, so I think when I pursued my faith seriously, so what it stems from is the convenient Christian. I mentioned, like, oh, like, we grew up in church. Like, I always believed there was a God of pain. He's not paying attention to me. So we prayed, like, we did church on Christmas. Like, we did these things I would probably label as a convenient Christian.
Okay.
I think when you start taking your faith seriously, you start allowing it to influence your character, your motivation, your actions, right? And so before then, you're just using it as like a moral, I don't know, refresh. Maybe it's an identifier of some sort. Maybe it's I'm not Jewish, I'm Christian, or I'm not, like, it becomes an accessory. I think when you're conveniently pursuing faith, it's an accessory, and you turn to it when it's convenient.
Yeah.
Right? I think when you take your faith seriously, the Christian faith cannot just be like, authentically cannot be an accessory. Like,
Right.
Jesus is too big for that. Like, the God of the universe does not sit on a shelf. You know what I mean? He sits on a throne.
He's not Elf on a Shelf.
No, he's not. But
No.
he probably do got a dope hat if you wanted one.
The outfit would be next level.
Yo, kill me with them outfit. I just picture God in an Elf on a Shelf outfit, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm about it.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm about it. But yeah, I think at that point in time you realize, like, your faith isn't there to serve you; you're there to serve it. I think that's the big transition. Like, it's not there for me to acquire when I need it, because that puts me on the throne. When you start to take your faith seriously, you start to realize the proper positioning of you and God. And the only reason you're in the throne room is because a man died on a cross for you and allowed you access, or else you would be nowhere near there. And so, I think every human being has like a throne internally, and whoever sits there calls the shots. And I think when you begin to take your faith seriously, you get out of the chair. You know what I mean?
That was really well put.
So.
What a great picture, too. So, Spence, you're amazing, and you know that I
You're
love
amazing.
everything about you, your story,
You're amazing.
your wife. I just love all of it.
Yeah, she's the best.
She is the best. Oh, you got brownie points for that, bro. I want to end with this because we talked about not giving up on people. But let's say that someone is struggling with some addiction of some sort. If someone feels stuck in this spiral of, I literally don't know how to get out of it, it looks too daunting for me to even try, what would you say to that person?
Sheesh. I don't know. I mean, assuming that there is an actual desire to want to get out of this addiction.
Yeah.
Like, there has to be that real desire, because, come on, man, like, quit. Don't play yourself. Like, if you don't want to stop, you won't. That's just what that is. I think you have to be honest with that. And so, but if there is that, and it's just, and that chemical has taken over, so to speak, whether it be, like if it's a porn addiction, obviously there's different chemicals in your body that are being released. But if you feel out of control of it, man, like, you got to reach out. I never went to rehab, but I know a lot of people who have found that beneficial. Reach out, man, to somebody, family, friends. And if they don't know what to do, like, it's tough to say give them grace, but, like, give them grace, man. Like, because you don't know either. That's why you're reaching out, right?
Yeah.
And so, but for the biggest thing for me, I might have mentioned already, it was this environment. It's just, I had to get out of my environment. I had to get out of my routine. I had to get out of these things that were going to enable me. Like, I'm telling you, when 18-year-old Spence in Tampa, Florida, I knew how to get anything.
Yeah.
At any point, at any time of day, any way possible.
Yeah.
I could figure it out.
Yeah.
When those things are removed from you, it forces your hand a little bit. And so, and I'm the kind of guy that, like, I'll finagle my way through it, And so when I got those things removed, man, it was a game changer. So I think your environment's huge, and it's tough because that's the most uncomfortable thing ever.
Yeah.
Right? And so I hated San Francisco for the first 3 months I lived there, man. I thought it was the worst, and it grew. Obviously, I love it now, but, like, because it wasn't what I knew. I didn't have all of my resources to do what I wanted to do, but I needed that. And so I think environment's huge, and I think community's number two. I think I probably would put environment, at least for me, one, but communities too, man. Like, get people in your corner who are going to fight you for you.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Fight for you. And again, that I don't know what that looks like. It's going to change. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that I'm solely responsible for you, but it means, like, I'm going to be there when you need me. And sometimes you need me to hold you. Sometimes I got to punch you in the face. Like, I don't know, man. It's a fluid it's a fluid. I think it's a moment by moment or situation by situation basis. So,
and I think that's an important point you bring up, because I think a lot of people, if they were approached about something, the first thing would be like, I don't know how to handle this. Well, they don't either.
Yeah.
And are you willing to try anyways?
Right. And
that's what's important.
And 100% of the cases are going to be messy.
Yes.
And messy isn't like, oh man, I spilled a cup. My bad, Zoe. Let me clean that up on your coffee table. It's like, oh no, I'm sorry, Zoe. I burnt down half of your house. You still cool? Are we still cool? That's what messy is.
Wow.
It's human messy.
Yeah.
Right? It's real human problems. It's you are risking me ruining your life in some way. Like that's what but is the soul and like of another person worth it? You know what I mean? Like, and it's tough, man, because there's a fine line between that and trying to be somebody's savior. And I think, and again, if you're in authentic prayer, reading the scriptures, and you have a good gospel-centered community around you, if you're the person like helping somebody out of addiction, I think you need that as well. But and that's a fine line. That's a whole different podcast for sure. But that's a fine line. You got to be very weary of that, because you can't say nobody. But yeah, man, I think it's going to be messy. But I think a healthy church should be messy on the edges. I don't know honestly what I would tell somebody with that outside of that.
I think you just told them.
Yeah,
that was good.
I don't think there's a black and white answer.
Yeah, you're gonna have to live in the gray with it, and how you respond too.
Yeah.
So, I think that was great. Spence, I think you've encouraged a lot of people, myself included. I obviously can't speak for other people right now because they aren't hearing this until they hear it.
Ooh, okay. Ooh, hey, don't do it to him, so don't do it to him. They ain't ready for the time warp. For the time warp.
Good thing we have a God outside of time.
Hey! Oh, she gone.
What just happened to my voice? Things are getting wild. We need to turn this off.
Okay.
Spence, thanks for being part of the Accidentally Intentional podcast.
Dude,
I'm for sure having you back.
Dude.
We literally just said in this 3 different times, that's a separate podcast.
Yeah.
So I guess we got to do 3 separate podcasts.
3 more, yeah.
All right.
You got my number.
Don't say I didn't warn you on that one. I truly hope you guys found that as challenging and encouraging as I did. If you want to give Spencer a follow on Instagram, his Instagram is I am Spencer Teo, and there you can check out all of his adventures, all of his projects, and also his company Strangely Dim Production House, which does photography, videography, and literally anything ever creative. Trust me, it's insane. You need to check out his work for yourself. Let's hit some of the takeaways. Number 1, you cannot remove something without replacing it. If you take what you were dependent on out, then you need to replace it with something healthy. Number 2, unhealthy dependencies and healthy lifestyles are built the same way. There has to be active disciplines involved. For instance, we could actively be pursuing the wrong thing. So in the same vein, we would need to actively pursue the right things to eliminate the former. If we have a focused mindset on strategy on how to actively pursue things, we will be able to change direction. A good question to ask ourselves is, what can I control to make sure that I'm steering this ship in the right direction? Number 3, get people around you who want to see you win. Encouragement is another form of accountability. Number 4, finding a community with healthy people is key. And I love how Spencer identified what healthy is defined as. And he said that if you're into faith, then using prayer and scripture will be your litmus test to discover what healthy looks like, and that they all have to work hand in hand. Number 5, ooh, this was so good. Nothing is neutral. You choosing to do one thing means that you are choosing not to do something else. If we aren't intentional with every movement, then we could wake up 10 years from now and wonder why we're still in the same place. Sheesh. Number 6, and this is where Spencer got emotional. Do not give up on people. The result of how you love someone could transform the entire trajectory of their life. We get the opportunity to show unconditional love to others, and maybe that includes people who have never experienced it before. Number 7 was a challenge question, and that was when Spencer asked, what do you stand for? Because if you know what you stand for, then we just need to focus on aligning our actions so that they lead back and point back to that. And honestly, this was the moment for me that I think was the mic drop. And it was one of his final points, was when he said, when you start taking your faith seriously, you start allowing it to influence your character, your motivation, and your actions. And then this beautiful picture he painted at the end when he said, everyone has their own throne internally, and whoever sits there calls the shots. So when you start to take your faith seriously, you have to get out of the chair. Oh my gosh, was that a call to action for me to really think every single day, am I getting out of the chair today? And am I focusing on letting the Lord guide my steps? The next one's going to be a fun one, another deep conversation, of course, where I speak to a friend about ghosting culture and unmet expectations. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed this episode, you probably noticed that I mentioned an episode I did with his wife. Now, that episode is actually on church hurt, which unfortunately it feels like most people have experienced today. So we talk about how to navigate that in its entirety. So click this link below and I'll see you in that next video.